Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my November wrap-up. This month I ended up finishing 3 books, but I also DNF'd one, and I'm almost about halfway through with another that I could finish tonight, and I'm filming this on the last day of November, but I don't think that I will, so that's why I'm filming this now, and that'll just be my first book of December. Spoiler for that, it's Wicked King. Hello, this is Future Sam, about to go to bed Sam, and I was looking at my reading spreadsheet and realized that I had read 5 books in November, but I forgot about one of them because I already unhauled it. And that is Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulthurst. I did a full review on this, so I'll link that on the screen. This is the first book in a YA fantasy, I believe is going to be a duology, and it follows 2 characters, Mare, and I forget the other girl's name, and the other girl is betrothed to Mare's brother in order to form a political alliance, and she has magic, and Mare's kingdom looks down on magic, and when she gets to the kingdom, she discovers that she's kind of a fish out of water, and she starts forming an unlikely friendship with Mare, who is training her to ride horses as part of like being a royal and things like that. And they end up actually forming a romance. This is a female-female romance with a fantasy backdrop. I didn't end up really loving this book. I think I gave it 2 stars, possibly 2.5 if I was being generous at the beginning of the month, but this was much more of a romance than a fantasy. I didn't really like the characters that much. Like I cared a little bit, but mostly I found them just to be and I found that a lot of the side characters weren't very good because they would kind of just change their motivations depending on what needed to be done for the romance. So basically the plot, the world building, everything about the story just kind of shifts around the characters in order to get them closer together and for them to have a romance. So I had a lot of questions about the magic and the magic system and some of the political things that weren't really answered because again, it's mostly just like all of these things are happening to push the romance along. So didn't end up loving this one. Do not plan on continuing with the series, obviously. And I've already unhauled the book, so I don't have it with me. Now on to the rest of the books. So the first book that I read this month was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. I've already done a full review for this, so I'll link that on the screen. This is an adult contemporary romance, and it follows our main character, Vanessa, and she has been an assistant to the star football player Aiden for a few years now, but she is going to quit to pursue her career as a graphic designer, as a freelance graphic designer, and after she does that, he comes to her and basically proposes a fake marriage because he is Canadian and he wants to have his citizenship, and everything kind of goes from there. Now this is a very long book. So Mariana Zapata writes very, very long books. This is 600 something pages, I think close to 700 pages. And that is what I struggled with. So this is a slow burn romance. Obviously we have some fake marriage and a lot of the things that come with like fake marriage, fake dating. But as I mentioned in my review, this is a slow burn that's not even a burn until 75% of the way into the story, and it's a very long book, like I said. So for most of the story, you actually don't get any inclination that Aiden feels anything for her or anyone else. He is so stoic, he is literally a wall, and there's no like banter, there's very few scenes of like chemistry or anything, especially until the very end, and I feel like you could cut out so much of this filler and just have more of these scenes condensed together and have like a 400-page book, and it would have been much better. This is good for people that aren't really into sex scenes though, because the one and only sex scene doesn't happen until 97% of the way into the book. Zapata is recommended for people that do love slow burn, but I prefer my slow burn with a little bit of heat, and the fire doesn't even turn on until way longer into the story. Like no one's even touched the thermostat. Like the thermostat is off. And then someone finally turns on the thermostat later on, but it takes a while to warm up. You get what I'm saying? So this was not a favorite of mine, and I rated it 2 out of 5 stars. Would I read more Mariana Zapata though? I would, because I don't go into some of these romances with like super high expectations, and it was just very easy like fluff filler that I needed at the very beginning of November because I was still recovering from my anxiety flare that I had during most of the fall. So I needed something that was like, this is mindless, and this was that. So I would definitely read more of her books, but I don't plan on reading her books back to back by any means. Then Tome Topple Round 9 started, and I picked up The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This is a standalone literary fiction story, follows our main character Theo, and he is in a horrible accident in his youth that ends up killing his mother, but he is in a art museum when this happens, and she is showing him one of her favorite paintings, which is this goldfinch, and the story kind of follows him and what's going on in his life, which is a lot of really shitty things, and then also has this background of this painting and this painting throughout the story. I DNF'd this book. So I got about, how many pages did I get in? 270 pages of a like 700 800-page book. So I tried to read this a while ago in 2015, and I've had this on my shelf I think since 2014, and couldn't get into it then. Forgot that I had read it at all and found my bookmark in it 40 pages in, and then tried really hard to push through, and then finally ran a poll on Twitter that was like, for people who read this book, should I push through? And most people said absolutely not, because if you're not liking it now, you're not going to like it, and it's not a satisfying enough ending. So I ended up DNFing this, and I'm happy that I did, because I was suffering through it. The thing with a lot of literary fiction that I've discovered, that of the stuff that I've tried to read, especially stuff that's like award-winning, is it's like, everything is awful, everything is awful, everything is awful. Some things are slightly good, everything is awful. And I'm like, I don't love stories like this where everything is awful all the time. Like, the writing was beautiful, and I do plan on trying to read A Secret History by Donna Tartt, but a book like this where it's just like, everything is awful, I don't really want to read that. So I then picked up the Book of Strange New Things by Michelle Faber. I also did a full review on this, so I will link that on the screen. This is also a standalone literary fiction story. This has a taste of sci-fi though, because it follows our main character of Peter, who is a Christian non-denominational missionary that is being sent to space to this new planet that this company is sort of, actually not really sure what they're doing on it exactly, but he's sent there because the native people there have requested a missionary. So he goes there and he has to leave his wife, who he's very close to, and this kind of challenges their relationship, and everything kind of goes from there. So kind of similar to what I was just saying about the Goldfinch, this is another literary fiction that you kind of feel a sense of unease, especially towards the end. Not so much in the beginning. I really did enjoy most of the first half, but it's very meandering, and I feel like I didn't get the point that it was necessarily trying to make, because there's a lot of questions that were left unanswered and a lot of things that I feel like the book hinted at that didn't really wrap up very well. I really enjoyed the writing, but I was expecting more of a sort of discussion about like losing faith or challenging faith in challenging times or something like that, because I myself am not very religious, but I like stories in which characters are sort of having to come to terms with moral codes within their religions, and how, like, you know, this guy going to a new planet, some of that is going to be challenged a bit because it's a totally different society. So I was expecting more of that and didn't quite get it. I also feel like this character went from being like naive and likable to naive and unlikable. A very realistic character, but grew to not like him. And again, a lot of just situations of like, everything is awful with some few good moments. Not as awful as the Goldfinch, I would say, but just a sense of unease kind of throughout. Good writing, again, because literary fiction just tends to have pretty good writing, but overall not something that I really loved, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And lastly, thankfully I ended this month on a good note. I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a standalone historical fiction kind of mixed with contemporary story, in which a young woman named Monique is working for a really big magazine. Sort of seems like it's this world's version of Vogue, and this hugely famous movie star contacts her magazine to specifically have her write a story about her. And so this girl goes to meet Evelyn Hugo, and everything kind of goes from there, and she ends up telling her her life story. So I will be doing a full review on this coming up next Monday, so don't worry, you'll get my full thoughts, but this was my Patreon book pick for this month. So every month my Patreon supporters get to vote in a poll on a book I will read and review that month, and this was this month's pick, and I'm so glad because it made me so happy. So if you want to participate in polls like this on my channel and contribute to my content in that way, I will link my Patreon on the screen. I really did adore this book, but I don't think that it's a surprise to anybody. I feel like most people have really enjoyed this book. This is just one of those stories that is so like glamorous but wonderful, and you just end up falling in love with all of the characters. It's so easy to read. This is a story where you go in with a question yourself just reading the cover of, why did this glamorous Hollywood star end up having 7 husbands? This is broken up into sections by husband, so you kind of get to see what's going on in her life. And I absolutely fell in love with her, but I also really liked the woman that was interviewing her. You only get slight tidbits of what is going on in the like present day with that character, but it just really appealed to me. A lot of the things that were going on with her relationship and what Evelyn was teaching her about herself and her relationship, I just loved it. And then you also fall in love with Evelyn as a character. This is also one of the only books that I've ever read, possibly the only book I've ever read, that had bisexual representation, where they actually say bisexual on the page, and the character actually says, I am bisexual, and talks about the challenges with that, and I loved that. So Evelyn Hugo, our main character, is bisexual, and it blew my mind. There were so many lines that I wrote down from this book. I just inhale read it in about 2 days, and I really want to see this be a movie. I hear that Freeform is going to make it into a series. I don't know how that's gonna go. I kind of just want this to be like a mini series or a movie, but I really enjoyed this. I originally gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, but honestly, I've still been thinking about it like days later, so I think it's going to have to be a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I just realized that I wasn't putting all the books up behind me because I was mostly disgraced by them. So I set them over there like, go away from me, because that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna be gone. So comment down below and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you've thought of them, and also what your favorite book that you read this month was. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.